What's up, everybody? Drasco here from 10knorm.com, where my main focus, our main focus, what it is that we're all doing here together is helping coaches inconsistently hitting 10K per months, overcome, work through, transcend all of the mindset and the emotional challenges that hold them back from making 10K months normal, so normalizing it. And we do this in conjunction, but before we stabilize with the marketing tactics. All right. And for each episode that you hear, that you see, whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening to it, every single episode comes with transcripts, additional resources, bonus trainings, bonus videos, whole bunch of good stuff at 10knorm.com. So you can go and get all of that for free for each episode, like a companion. And what we're going to handle today is a little bit of a meta type subject, a topic, an issue, etc. And what this is about is really like, what is your real competition? Okay, who is your real competition? So first things first, when I say competition, what does that mean to you? What does it elicit in you? Is it something that you feel like, oh my God, I know there's so much competition out there, I don't know how to stand out through the noise? Is it, I don't even know how to overcome the noise because of the algorithms, because of gurus saying I have to do it this way because I don't have a big audience, etc. Like, what does competition elicit to you, right? Maybe it's not even about like the competition element. Maybe it's, oh my God, I don't think I'm good enough, like all these other people that I follow, to actually elicit the transformations in my clients. So again, what does competition elicit to you? Because I would invite you to consider that that is really the mirror that is showing you what is your real competition. Okay, so here's what I mean about this. The topic that we're going to talk about today is like, Netflix is your real competition. Okay, and this is something I heard from Jonathan Goodman, who he does trainings for fitness professionals. And for those of you that don't know, I came from the fitness space. I owned a brick and mortar weight loss center for 10 years. He had a post about this. I was like, yeah, this is actually very true, because it's something that we work through quite a bit in the 10K Norm program, and something I'm going to develop through the course of this channel with regards to the specifics and the tools of how to work through the deeper issues that not just illuminate what is really holding us back, but also the tools on how to transcend it. So when it comes to Netflix is your real competition, when it comes to this is all a mirror for what you really have to work through, what does that actually mean? So first things first, let's look at all the stuff I mentioned at the beginning, right? I said, do you feel like it's the other coaches that are your competition? Do you feel like it is the algorithm that is holding you back? Do you feel like you don't have the skills to do what it is you need to do? Or the doubt or whatever? First thing I want you to do is distinguish which of those do you have control over. Okay, you don't have control over how many coaches are out there. You don't have control over the narratives that are in your space. You don't have control over what the algorithm does or does not do. You don't have control over how many people are having similar offers as you, as rep, the case may. So those are circumstances. You do not control those. Okay, so then what's the focus? Okay, things like skill sets, 100% you have control over those. So now it's like, okay, where am I putting my control? That is the most important factor. So when it comes to that, why is Netflix your biggest competition? Right? You don't control Netflix. What does this have to do with anything? So if you're watching this on YouTube, what you'll see is I have notes on here that I'm going to be going through. So if you go to 10knorm.com, you can obviously download those notes and, add to them as, you hear things that I don't put on the screen that may be relevant to you. But the way that I'm looking at Netflix is your biggest competition is I'm naming Netflix as the small part of you. Okay, the part that runs from facing pain and the part that runs towards pleasure. That is your biggest competition. Okay, it is the part of you that puts the brakes on you while you're trying to push forward, right? And this is true whether or not you're, aiming to go for 10K months or even if you're going beyond. But the reality is, all of those pieces of us, all of that resistance, that's the real competition. Everything else doesn't matter. Okay, and I know this firsthand because when I had my studio, I literally had 5 other boutique gyms around me, yet there was still an abundance of clients to go around. So first thing you want to check here is, am I in that scarcity mindset, right? If you are, then you are allowing Netflix to actually win. Because like, if you can imagine that in the world, right, if you're an online coach, then technically the world is your market. Now obviously there's sub markets in there because you're not coaching everybody, but the reality is, like, if you can imagine 100 people being like the ones that you really can serve with your signature offer, like, that changes your life, right? There's enough 100 people pools to go around for all coaches, right? Like, as the world evolves and as it gets better, we are able to completely and utterly serve these people because people need the things that they need. They're not going to go for, everybody, and you are a better fit for somebody than somebody else, right? This was obviously true in my previous business, and it's going to be true in this business. It's always going to be true. So Netflix is the small part of you that will keep these narratives going, and it'll distract you by moving towards something that is more pleasurable right now and that runs away from the discomfort that you feel, right? Anytime you want to level up, there is a discomfort there, okay? Netflix and its associated, right? So again, I'm going to use Netflix here as like, it could be anything. It could be drama, right? You get caught up in the drama of something, any form of self-sabotage, right? Any form of holding yourself back, imposter syndrome, perfectionism, analysis, but like whatever it is that keeps you from doing what you truly know to do, that's your real competition. That is the game that you truly have to win. And, full disclosure, before I recorded this, I was in a loop of like, well, like maybe I should do this. I'm not really feeling it. I've, recorded a bunch of these all at once. Like, there was just all of these loops. Those loops had nothing to do with who else has content like this. It had nothing to do with, how many people are out there saying the same messages. Who is my other competition? Like, what is like, it had nothing to do with that. It had everything to do with me getting in a state, getting my thoughts right, getting a narrative to be aligned with what it is I truly wanted to say here. Because I know firsthand that those things, whether we're talking about it from like the client work that I did and walking people through changing their lifestyle, it is always the smaller part of us that is the ultimate competition. That's the part of us that keeps us, instead of eating the healthy food, that goes for the ice cream, right? Instead of getting onto your phone and doing a live, talking about an offer that you have, asking your audience like, hey, would you like it if I did a training on this, right? Instead of doing that, quote unquote, Netflix is the part that just gets you to be like, no, I have to, laundry's really important right now. Like, I really have to do laundry. That's the real competition at any level, regardless of what the thing is. It'll show up when you're trying to exercise. It'll show up when you're trying to have a better relationship. It'll show up when you're trying to have a meditation practice. It'll show up when you're trying to market. It'll show up when you're trying to stabilize 10K months in your business. Okay, so Netflix is your real competition. The abundance of dopamine hitting things, the abundance of, hyper pleasurable things around us in the form of food, in the form of entertainment, in the form of phones, in the form of other vices, they're more than we can consume in a lifetime. Okay? That is your real competition. That primal part of us, that smaller part of us that doesn't know how to operate in this type of environment, that's our real competition. So when it comes to the discomfort of leveling up, when it comes to the fear and the doubt of putting yourself out there, where it comes to that voice in your head, that inner critic that doubts your impact and your service, overcoming that is your biggest competition. Okay? When it comes to that part that runs towards pleasure, right? That wants to just distract you. Hey, take it easy, right? Like, go and just, have this pleasurable thing, right? The part that dulls your feelings, right? That part of you that appeases to anything that holds you back, that is your biggest competition. It's going to come in all forms. It's going to come at all times. It's going to masquerade itself as something legit, right? Like, I'm not saying go do the work when you're like legit exhausted and you need a rest. But deep down inside, like, like looking back on it every single time we go through this, we all have this experience. We know when, like, genuinely, you know what, I'm tired, but I have too much guilt to like take a day off, take some time off, clear my schedule. Like, we know deep down, we all know. But it's our relationship to that keeps us from doing that. That is the Netflix. That is the real competition. The part that keeps us from what our higher self truly knows. That is the real competition. That is what Netflix represents, because we tend to default to running away from that, because that part of us gets first dibs. Okay? But it's our higher self that has final say. And it is the practice of how well do we let the higher self veto that lower self. That is really what makes the difference in everything that we do, right? We are the bottleneck to everything that we want. And it is through developing the skills to expand that bottleneck, right? Because if it's really, really small, so will impact and service be. But if that bottleneck begins to expand because you're better able to transfer the stuff from your higher self to like your lower primal self, the better everything ends up being. So when it comes to this, right, the real way through everything that Netflix represents, that is your real competition, it comes down to nurturing the higher part of ourselves, right? This is what the 10K norm program, the 10K norm movement, these videos, these podcasts, this is what it's truly about. And it's really normalizing the nurturing of that higher part of ourselves, right? It's normalizing tolerating any discomfort that we feel long enough. It's normalizing the fact that feelings aren't going to kill us. It's normalizing the fact that even though urges feel urgent, to not indulge them, right? To do better, not just because we know better, but because we practiced how to do better. Okay, so it's normalizing, tolerating all of that cumulatively, and doing that long enough to have the final say on what we know is in our best interest and that ultimately is for the highest good of all. That is more important than anything that falls under that umbrella of Netflix is ever going to provide. All right? That is what normalizing 10K months is all about. Once you handle the drama, the stabilizing of that is just math, it's just strategy, it's just implementation. But it's when we can get out of our own way, when we can take the brakes off of ourselves, that truly changes. And we have to think, feel, and act daily to make that happen. All right? And then normalizing right? This is kind of like number 2. So normalizing, creating the space to respond and not react to the urges that take us away from the work that creates the highest sense of self, right? So it's not running away from pain towards pleasure right now at the expense of what is good for us long term. And it is creating the space where we can pause long enough to sit through the discomfort and the urgency of the urges that move us towards things like Netflix, that distract us from doing our best. And it is in that space, right? If you ever read, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, right? He talks about the space between the stimulus and the response. In that space is where we technically have the power of choice to do something different. That is where we can choose to veto what will be our default. Okay, in that space, we create the normalizing and stabilizing of 10K months. But until that space is created reliably enough, everything we create from a marketing standpoint, from a business standpoint, from a strategy and tactics standpoint is very fragile. Okay, it can exist much like a house of cards, right? It's there, but it's extremely fragile. And if it doesn't last, it doesn't really count. It's not what we're about. All right. The last part of this is like, how do you beat the real competition? It's normalizing the eliciting of the state where we show up, right, in our most authentic self, in our most genuine way, in the way that will automatically filter like who it is that we serve best. So we normalize the state where we show up genuinely to the people that need us most in the way that meets them where they are. So now we're combining it with the marketing bits. Like, how do I show up in a way that meets people where they're at? Well, first and foremost, I have to be comfortable. I have to have worked through my own stuff to even be able to show up. Because you could understand your clients at the deepest of levels. You could be exceptional at what it is that you do. But if you're not showing up, it's irrelevant. The people that need you most don't know about you. So it is the working through. It is the defeating of the competition of Netflix, the parts that hold us back, the smallness of ourselves, that becomes the most important aspect in your marketing, because it is the one thing that cannot be done without you, right? As a coach, especially when you're under the 10K per month mark, you cannot show up any different way other than you, right? This is why oftentimes having people do your advertising fails, because you yourself have not gotten out of the way to uncover, okay, what is it that I'm about, so that I can show up in that way. And once I do that, I let reality tell me, hey, this is working or it's not working. Then I can adjust that and meet people where they're at. But at that point, we've overcome the biggest limiting factor, which is I have to show up, right? It doesn't matter whether you do video, audio, you do ads, you don't do ads, you do some combination thereof. Without you showing up, nothing happens. Okay, so this is what I am the biggest obstacle to my dreams actually all about. It is potentially bad news if you're like, oh my God, this is too overwhelming. I would invite you to consider that's actually the best news, because everything that I've been talking about, you control. You control how you show up to the competition of Netflix. And that is a beautiful thing, because once you develop that skill set, it opens up so many things. Anything you want to level up in, you now have the skill set to do. That is what the first 2 months of our 10K Norm program are all about, which is learning how to show up so that the highest part of you can come forward. And when it doesn't, you have the tools to navigate that so that we create the space for the marketing to actually work in an authentic way. And then that's where the good things can happen, right? So that's all I got today. A little bit of a different episode than I've been doing in the last little while, but that's okay. So if you want the notes from this episode, if you want the transcript from it, you can just search through and see, where's that thing that I said that might have triggered something in you. It's like, okay, I want to know more about that. But more importantly, if you want access to the full catalog of not just the episodes, but the additional trainings and things that come with it, just go to 10knorm.com, and that's where you can download everything, use it as accompaniment to all the episodes. You'll literally have access to everything. It'll be your resource for normalizing 10K months. That's all I got for you today. Thank you very much for listening, and hope you do the best you can today with beating your own version of Netflix. Bye, everybody.